Hello and welcome to my podcast, A Historically Accurate Scorpion Skeleton. Today we're going to be talking about utopias, what nature means in utopias, and how this applies to Houston's built environment considering the lack of zoning laws. To start out, we're going to talk about some historical examples of utopias, starting out with a satirical one, Cloud Cuckoo Land from Aristophanes' play Birds, in this book here. Aristophanes was an Athenian playwright who lived in the 5th century BCE. He wrote Birds in 415 BCE, kind of in an era of Athens beginning to decline. This play features two Athenian men, Euelpides and Pisistratus, who decide that they're going to leave human society out of their disdain for bureaucracy in favor of moving in with the birds. They decided this because they heard of a bird named Tereus, who once was a man and became a hoopoe. So they go and they meet with Tereus, and they tell him, we want to become birds, we want to move in with you. And Tereus is like, yeah, you're totally welcome. And then all the real birds are like, no, humans are our enemies, we will not welcome you, we will not accept you. So the men propose, what if we build a city? And this city is going to wrap all the way over the sky, between the earth and the heavens, so that way, whenever humans try to send offerings to the gods, you get those offerings instead. Like, you will become the new gods by building this city. They decide that they're going to call the city Cloud Cuckoo Land. After the city is kind of built, various humans keep coming and trying to join Cloud Cuckoo Land and become birds, but they all get turned away. The gods also come and visit to try to be like, hey, yo, what are you doing? But at the end of the story, they're starving so much from not getting any of their offerings that they're like, I mean, yeah, if you'll feed us, we'll do kind of whatever you want. So I thought this was a really interesting example of utopia, considering the only way to join this utopic society is to stop being human and become a bird. I also don't have a great knowledge of Greek writing other than what I enjoy reading in my free time, but this does point to an extended lineage of utopias in past writings, as this kind of has to be a pre-existing trope in order for Aristophanes to make fun of it. All right, so with this knowledge, what do you guys think?
I mean, not gonna lie, I kind of get it. If I had the option to become a bird and leave society,
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really interesting point that the only way for this utopia of Cloud Cuckoo Land to exist, well, firstly, it's exclusive. Like you have to be a bird to join, so you can become a bird. But usually, even if you want to become a bird, you're turned away. And it exists sort of to the detriment of another sort of civilization, if you will, like the city of the gods. So it's like actively um it's both exclusive and exploitative of others. So I think that that's a really interesting point on Cloud Cuckoo Land.
it does raise the question of who is utopia actually for?
Yeah, because really those two men were like, we've created this utopia and we're shutting the door behind us. Like other humans are not allowed to become birds and join us.
Mm-hmm.
And it relies on blocking the offerings to the gods.
Yeah.
Which, if it weren't doing that, then this utopia wouldn't exist. It can only exist because of those who are not part of it.
Yeah.
It's also kind of interesting that Cloud Cuckoo Land, it has this staying power because it's a very, very old play, but you see it come back up again. I remember that it was a scene in the Lego movie.
Yeah, it was like that weird floating party.
I saw years ago. So
yeah, it's interesting because I think in the Lego movie it is very much depicted as kind of this strange utopia where everyone's happy all the time, everyone's partying. But that also was kind of a very exclusive utopia because you'll only enjoy it if you like it being, loud and partying all the time.
Not my utopia.
Yeah, right? Seems like a lot of work, honestly.
Not my utopia.
Another piece of modern work that it comes up again in is the book, which is actually called Cloud Cuckoo Land. I haven't read it, but my mom has. So I'm getting this off the plot summary from Wikipedia. Shout out Gina Hooper, who is the reason I know this book exists. So according to the Wikipedia page, the reason why this novel is called Cloud Cuckoo Land is in the book, there is another book, kind of like a fable, which is about this shepherd who wants to reach Cloud Cuckoo Land, which in this book within a book is kind of this fabled paradise. And this this book that it's written about, it's about all these different people who read this fable and kind of, I guess, how it connects them, as far as I can tell. But anyway, that's interesting. It's interesting how like the idea of Cloud Cuckoo Land being this utopia keeps popping up again in modern culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially because it's really like a lot of parts in the play are about how it's not an ideal utopia. I'm going to read a passage that's from what one of the ex-men, I guess now birds, is doing when the gods come to ask for their kind of godliness back. Here, the gods are coming up, and then we see one of the men like working. And he says, "The cheese grater, someone, and hand me the horseradish. Oh, and the cheese. Now, poke the fire." And Poseidon says to him, "A greeting to you, my man. We're a threesome of gods." And Pisistratus says, "I'm grating horseradish." Heracles, another one of the gods in this envoy, says, "Is it meat? What's the fare?" And here Pisistratus says, "It's a bevy of birds. They were caught trying to undermine the bird democracy."
Oh, how lovely.
So yes, in this scene, Pisistratus has killed and is now roasting and eating some of the birds that tried to defy his new order.
So that's not great.
That's not very utopia of him.
Yeah, right?
Typically, cannibalism, maybe that's, again, not my utopia.
So I just think it's like very interesting because kind of the whole point of this play is that you cannot create a utopia. Like a utopia is impossible, but it still keeps popping up again and again in modern society, and it's kind of lost that nuance. Now it's just kind of this. Now Cloud Cuckoo Land is just like kind of an idea of an absurd utopia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is. I would rather think about a happy, fun utopia than one where birds eat each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, only specifically like the like upper class of birds can eat, I guess, the worker class of birds.
And
Of
it's
course.
interesting to think that, like, another part of that is like this upper class of birds, like he used to be a human.
Yes.
So he's a human bird eating the bird.
It almost kind of gives me
Colonizer.
like clone, yeah, right. I was
Yeah.
gonna say like it's kind of like this patronizing vibe where it's like the birds were unable to think of usurping the gods by themselves. A human, kind of like a better race, had to come in and say, like, you guys do so much for humans, you should usurp the gods.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also I feel like a very human thing to do. Like I can become
Yeah.
a god. Anyway,
Mm.
so let's
Cloud
move on
Cuckoo
to our
Land.
next historical utopia. This one is a very, very different form of media than this play. So this is the painting Mongyudoando, which means Dream Journey to the Immortal Peach Orchard in English. This is a 15th century Korean painting, which I'm going to pull up now. I think this painting is really interesting because of the influence it's currently having in South Korean society. There's kind of a big architectural movement centered around almost bringing back traditional Korean aesthetics, centered around this painting, with like works like the Mongyeondo Tower and the Doe-Sogil Cultural Complex Center. Doe-Sogil is kind of an interesting building because it's open to the public. They hold exhibitions there. There's like public spaces. So again, I just think it's very interesting how this painting is being used again.
It's a very, very like aesthetically pleasing painting. I think something interesting about it is it's a dream journey to the immortal peach orchard. And so it sort of looks like a dream. Like from looking at it from far away, it sort of looks like mountains or trees in a fog and a mist. But when you look up close, it is very abstract. Especially for a landscape painting, it is very abstracted. It has this dreamlike quality, almost like you're recalling the scene from a long time ago. Um, and it shows this sort of like pathway from left to right to get to that immortal peach orchard. And you can sort of imagine the pathway that someone would have to take to get there.
Oh, a couple cultural things I want to bring in because you guys probably don't know this. So, first of all, in East Asian painting, one really interesting thing is unlike kind of like more Western lineages of landscape painting, you don't paint necessarily landscapes that you see. You paint kind of like ideas of landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is the reason why it's an immortal peach orchard is in kind of Korean mythology, peaches are really associated with like divine beasts and gods. It's supposed to be kind of like their favorite food.
Interesting.
Which is, yeah, that's just why it's peaches. I always think that's very interesting, that like why peaches are kind of so revered by divine beings in Korean mythology.
They taste good.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, they do.
Yummy.
Like if I were a Korean dragon, I would go ham on peaches.
Absolutely.
But I mean, of course, ancient Greece and um, a really long time ago in Korea, these are two like geographically separated societies, and yet there is this sort of tie through with this idea of a utopia or something that's idealized, like this immortal peach orchard. And what's really interesting is that they both have to do with feeding the gods in this weird
Yes.
way. Yeah.
But also this like it being inaccessible to mortals.
Mm-hmm. This is the
Like-
immortal peach orchard.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think there's kind of an interesting cultural split here between Eastern and Western, where in Aristophanes, which is like, kind of a Western lineage, it's kind of like you want to be special, like you want to
Mhm.
stand out, like I'm upsetting the gods, I'm taking over their place. Whereas kind of in Korean mythology, if I were, let's say, like a tiger, and if I did my job really well, if I were like very spiritually good, I could become a divine beast, I could become a god. So like kind of there's kind of this interesting idea where if you just work hard enough, you can kind of enter this like divine utopia. I do think also the fact that it's a dream journey brings up an interesting point that maybe the only way to build a utopia is through like a dream or a memory. Like there is no real utopia that can exist, but like dreaming is utopia in and of itself.
And like how you were saying how this painting and sort of um this tradition is sort of coming back in like in modern Korea. I think it's interesting because like you were saying like a dream, sort of like recollection. There is like a lot of nostalgia.
Yes.
And we see like, there's a lot of nostalgia for like this tradition for, this painting and what this painting represents. And I think that that is interesting because when you're like looking back on something, oftentimes you might only remember the good. Like nostalgia is like such a specific feeling.
Yeah.
So it sort of creates an idealized past.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I also think it's interesting how nature plays into both of these kind of ideas of utopias, where, it's like this painting, it is kind of a natural scene. There's trees, there's mountains. And in Aristophanes, the birds are very much associated with the natural world. One of the opening scenes almost when the men meet Tereus is Tereus describing how the birds live like this natural lifestyle, and the men saying kind of like, oh, that is so cool, that is amazing. And him talking about like all the different natural places where the birds live.
Hmm.
But you do see this theme of it's nature, but designed and adapted for humans,
People.
really.
Yeah.
Like the peach orchard isn't something that
Yeah.
it's a monoculture. It's not something that just happens to emerge. It's something that's very carefully cultivated for the benefit of people.
Yes.
And I mean, same way with the bird society. I mean, you have to have these humans come in and make it better, make it this
Yes.
actual utopia.
Moving on to our next ideal of kind of controlled nature and how that's utopia for humans, I want to talk about kind of the movement of American transcendentalism and their ideals of how kind of nature is vital to society, but how their ideas of what nature is are very kind of specific and limiting.
Yeah, I think that that's really interesting to bring in because, we've seen the birds, literally the birds in
Literally,
birds
yeah.
in Cloud Cuckoo Land, um, sort of representing how nature is sort of a key piece to what humans imagine a utopia to be. We see the peaches in the natural landscape and the immortal peach orchard as another utopia. And there is sort of this movement much later in history and in a different area entirely in North America. You have this movement where quote unquote wild places or the wilderness, nature is romanticized. It's given a very religious quality, whereas before you have this heritage of people being more afraid of nature. Like,
Mm.
if you think about like Grimm's fairy tales, where like something bad
Yeah,
always
yeah,
happens in
yeah.
the forest. Um, you have your people are afraid of wolves and bears and this and that, and then it gets to a point where it's very different, and wild places sort of take on this religious quality, like quote unquote God's majesty for Christianity specifically. And you have these figures like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau who really make this push to romanticize the
Yes,
wilderness, and
yes.
they're doing it in a way that's quite problematic, and they have a very colonist mindset, a very misogynist mindset, and they are very selectively saying like, oh, this nature is better than this nature, and um they're really looking for something that's pristine when it's not
Yes.
something that really exists, and it often involved pushing people who already lived in that
Hmm.
area off of that land, especially indigenous peoples in North America. So you have this you have this idea of like another sort of utopia that's really it really only benefits some select
Yes.
people, and it exists at the detriment of others.
Yeah, it really kind of is Cloud Cuckoo Land again, except instead of birds, we have white men.
White men hiking.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because you hear about like Walden Pond, Thoreau, and it's like, oh, he lived in a cabin in the woods. He was so connected with nature. And then you find out his mom came out like every day and did his laundry
Yep,
for him.
and cooked for him.
So like for him it was totally a utopia. He gets to like kind of live in these woods that he loves and spend all his time kind of hiking around and like cataloging nature, which is like a very, very important natural archive for
Mhm.
looking at ecological changes. However, like what kind of utopia is it for his mom who had to then go hike out to this random cabin her son is living in every day to like do his laundry and cook for him? She has to
Mhm.
put in a lot more effort in order to maintain this like utopic living for him.
Mhm. Precisely. And I think what's interesting when we're bringing in the dream journey to the immortal peach orchard, that's a whole lineage of art. And you have a very different, because we talked about a little bit earlier about Western landscape painting and how the idea is like realism, but it's romanticized.
Yes.
That's literally a romantic movement. And it's maybe the colors are a little brighter, the light is parting beautifully, and we're only capturing like the most beautiful parts of nature. But
Yeah.
it does like there is this whole huge landscape painting movement that happens around this time.
Yes. Yeah, it's really people used these kinds of idealized images of nature, but they are somewhat realistic representations in order to kind of push for what I would call like the current national park system by
Hmm.
kind of showing people like, look how beautiful our natural environments could be in the US. And like honestly, our current natural park system, like it has lots of flaws, largely involved with pushing out people who used to live in these areas,
Hmm.
but also based like it is kind of important to try to preserve natural ecosystems. There's really just trying to balance like
Yeah.
how do we balance those things?
It's really hard. I mean, you see in places in the US, even um, globally, a lot of places that have been like historically conserved. I mean, usually the original usage of that land was for wealthy white men to go hunt or hike or
Yeah.
whatever. And gradually it's, opened up, and a lot of these places have become very important places for wildlife conservation and have involved the local community and are like really positive forces these days. But there is that really troubling history.
Yes.
I think there's this idea of humans being kind of separate from our environment and
Mhm.
um, almost ruling over it in a way,
Yeah.
rather than being part of our environment. Like, and it even goes back to this idea of like pristine nature, of
Yeah.
if humans are involved in any way, that spoils it somehow,
Mhm.
when really we are part of our environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah, I want to talk about next kind of we think about the environment only as quote unquote natural places, but the place where humans live is also an environment. There are animals and plants who live in our cities with us. So I want to talk about kind of how Houston is constructed because I think it has a really interesting setup considering like the lack of zoning laws going on. When I first came to Houston, I was touring Rice. Like, I'd gotten in, I just wanted to come check it out. And when I got here, I was shocked by the amount of greenery. I was, I heard Houston, I heard city. I didn't expect there to be any trees. So I was like, wow, like look at all these trees. This is amazing. But after I like actually, came to Rice and it was living in Houston longer, I realized, oh, there's a lot of trees, but only in a very, very limited area.
Yes.
And
And like here where we are at Rice, we're very fortunate to be near Herman Park and to be in this, it's a very affluent area and museum district. There are so many trees, but you go downtown and poof,
nothing. Yeah, if you're not rich enough, you don't get green trees. Also, an interesting thing about all the trees that I obviously didn't notice when I first visited was it's all live oaks. Like, and I understand live oaks are like, they're a very pretty tree. They make wonderful tree tunnels. They're kind of symbolic of Houston in a way. However, I think historically speaking, there probably were other trees that existed here other than live oaks.
I'd be willing to bet.
Just, yeah, just
Probably.
maybe. And so this kind of, even though Rice is, an arboretum and kind of supports all these trees, it creates a very kind of unhealthy ecosystem on campus. There are some species groups that do very well. For example, I study live oak gall wasps, and there are a lot of these on campus. They have a great time in this forest of live oaks. However, anything else that maybe wants a non-live oak tree is kind of out of luck.
Yeah. And the other thing is that a lot of the live oaks on campus are about the same age. So, that could lead to issues down the line when they all get quite old and start losing limbs. And it also makes monocultures very vulnerable to pests and disease, which can hop from one individual of the same species to the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah, one issue that my grandmother told me that my aunt used to complain about when she came to Rice was what she called bird season, which was when all the trees in the area attracted a lot of grackles, so many grackles that they would poop on people as they flew overhead. Obviously, this was a big issue, especially in the like kind of medical district, because there's a lot of kind of vulnerable, like medically speaking, people there as a medical district. So, according to my grandmother, they put up some netting to try to stop the birds from like sitting in these trees, nesting in these trees, causing poop problems. However, if you prevent any birds from getting to the trees, you've created another problem. And this is the caterpillar problem. And I don't know if you've ever perhaps accidentally touched these fuzzy caterpillars that like to live in live oaks, but you will have a very, very bad day if you
It's
do.
horrible.
Yeah, like in obviously in my lab we have to touch trees a lot, and my PI was like do not touch the fuzzy caterpillars. Like be very careful not to touch the fuzzy
They may
caterpillars.
be cute, but do not touch them.
You will not have a good time.
Very bad time. Moving on from just talking about the strict ecology of Houston, let's get into the like more about the zoning laws. Because ideally, having no zoning laws could lead to some really interesting mixed use communities. For example, this like thank you for throwing a scorpion at me. For example, we have this new construction that's meant to happen at Rice, the so-called Gateway Project. They're creating a pedestrian-oriented street, which is important because there's like
And
very
grocery
few.
store.
Woo, and a grocery
Grocery
store.
store.
Yeah, because like it's hard to walk around in Houston. And so they're like it's gonna have multifamily housing, stores, restaurants, grocery store,
Walking
and a
to the
public
grocery
green
store is
space.
not an
Yeah.
option right now. If you don't have a car,
You're kind of
just
Screwed,
no
yeah.
no groceries for you.
So like if someone could live in one of the multifamily housing units and walk to the grocery store, maybe if they work at Rice, they could walk to their job, like that would be ideal. However, it's really catering to a very small, probably already pretty privileged community. Like I've got to be honest, if you're looking at the mega mansions in this area,
Yeah.
I don't think they're the people who necessarily need a grocery store in walking distance.
Yep.
And so this lack of zoning creates these really, really nice mixed use communities for very wealthy audiences. However, having no zoning laws also means that you can build, let's call it like industry or waste disposal areas near other housing units.
And guess who gets to live in those?
Would those be lower income or people of color? Could it be?
Shocking.
Could it be?
Shockingly,
Yeah.
you might be correct.
So yes, one article I was reading while doing some background research said that even as of 2014, most waste is still disposed of in Black neighborhoods. So that's
Not ideal.
really less than ideal.
A lot of people really like this idea of no zoning laws, deregulation, because, like, even progressives, you see the same sentiment of zoning laws prevent these mixed use communities that are so positive and helpful. But zoning laws also prevent this
Exploitation.
Yes.
exploitation and this very, very distinct divide between those who get to live in these wonderful mixed use areas and those who get to live next to oil and gas industry.
Mm-hmm.
The area that I'm thinking of in the east side of Houston by 225, as I drive down there, you'll see houses right next to these massive factories spitting out who knows what into the air.
I bet that's really good for their lung health.
I bet
I-
that the cancer rates definitely don't correlate to the proximity to those factories.
Asthma, I bet
Oh
no
yeah.
correlation
No
whatsoever.
correlation.
It's same all the way across Houston. And so, really, it's not the zoning laws that are the problem. It's zoning laws that are designed to construct an environment of separation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are ways to design laws like this in ways that can encourage these mixed use communities while also preventing the exploitation of, oh, you know where a really convenient place to build this power plant is? Right next to this low income neighborhood that can't do anything about it.
Hooray. Yeah, and then also kind of in the same vein, like all of kind of the green space, the trees, it's all in like the wealthier areas. And trees are very, very important in cities, especially in hot states like where we are right now, because, there's kind of the urban heat island effect where all this concrete is just like building up more and more heat. And trees really, really help. It's, nature's air conditioning. That's why even in the summer, I could go on runs around the outer loop as long as
That's brutal.
it was brutal, but I still could do it. I would not have been able to do it if it weren't for the
You can
trees.
go sit and hang out in Herman Park and it's lovely.
Yes. And so this really ties in like we think of nature as kind of this utopic thing, and only the rich people are kind of deserving of having these elements of utopia in their living area.
And it happens at the detriment of others.
Yes.
Because every neighborhood, every society has its factories and its waste disposal sites. And, in an ideal world, maybe those would be cleaner and wouldn't be as much of a source of pollution and illness. But, where we are right now, that's how it works. And yet we can't so our society wouldn't really function without waste disposal and energy production. So
Yeah.
It goes back to this idea we mentioned earlier of who are utopias for,
Yes.
and the way that Cloud Cuckoo Land could only exist.
if the gods starved.
Hmm.
Yeah, if the gods starve, and kind of also if humans are willing to keep sending them like sacrifices and keep willing to keep kind of working for them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because yeah, it's really kind of honestly, we live in like a utopic area here, and we live in it at because there are other areas that we're exporting like our waste and our energy costs to.
Mhm.
And this is true, honestly, not just in Houston, but on a global level. The
Mhm.
wealthy countries are exporting our industry to other countries so we can look greener, we can look cleaner, we have better air. But overall, we're not doing any better. We're just moving
Putting
for
it somewhere
habits.
else,
Yeah.
A very major export from the United States to China is garbage.
Yeah. So it's happening on a very, very clear level within Houston itself, but this is a global problem. And it's clearly been kind of a lasting idea throughout history. In Cloud Cuckoo Land, it's from 415 BCE.
A long time
It's a
ago.
long time ago. And really, the whole idea in that book is pretty much I'm like a wealthy white man and I don't like the society I'm living in. So I'm going to go kind of exploit another population to build utopia just for me. Because the birds, honestly, they think it's their utopia, but is it really? Like the birds are still working within the city.
The birds are the ones being eaten if they
The
mess
birds are
up.
being eaten by Terrace. And like one of the things that they kind of wrangle out of the gods in order to be like, yeah, we'll give you some food if we do this, is they ask for one of like Zeus's cupbearers or something because one of the X-Men now birds wants to marry her.
Oh my god.
Right? Like they're literally just they're living their ideal life at the expense of so many other people. So
Yeah.
I think it's very natural to want to imagine a world that's perfect, that doesn't have any of the problems that everyone deals with in their daily life. But that really can't happen unless you pass those problems off to someone
Yeah.
else. And that's not better.
It's not very nice.
Maybe instead of
It's not.
trying to seek out and create a perfect world, the focus should be on making the one we have better.
yes.
I agree. That's very wise.
Yeah. So I think really what we've learned this podcast is that there is no such thing as a utopia for everything.
Sorry.
For everyone.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. Like, I mean, I think the closest we've gotten is according to Mangyudo Wando, perhaps if we all slept all the time and only lived in our dreams, that could be our utopia. Unless you have a nightmare. So sorry for you.
And if we were all just politely behaved tigers.
And if we were all just yeah, so that's the other very interesting thing is kind of culturally, what do you have to do to join the utopia? Because that's why people want to collect so much money in America, is you can join the kind of like utopic class of society if you have enough money.
This very, very individualistic view.
Yes.
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. Leave everyone else behind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, because we're really training ourselves in America that like you can have a utopia for yourself if you're willing to sacrifice other people.
Be a good little capitalist.
So I think really, honestly, in order to create the closest thing we can have to a worldwide utopia, we need to start by like redefining our relationships with other people and money. And like probably the concept of what we need to have a good life.
This has been very enlightening.
Are you sure? I really think I do need $1 billion to enjoy my life.
Not hurt.
If we could just all have $1 billion, who knows inflation? Inflation, not here. So, anyway, this has been Utopia and how it eventually builds up the Houston's built environment.
This has been a historically accurate Scorpion Skeleton production.
You will not hear from us again.